And welcome back to Modern Survivability. Think fast, think accurate. This is going to be Real Talk episode 6. So, with that being said, I know we haven't made a video in a couple of weeks now, but there's kind of been a lot going on, so on and so forth. A couple of big things we're going to talk about in this. It's going to be kind of a quick little conversation we're going to have today, but a couple of things I want to cover. One is where we're picking up from last time with the hurricanes that we had, Hurricane Helene and then Hurricane Milton, I think it was. Obviously the first one we had already hit on it because the last episode was right after it happened. And there were, tons and tons of things going on. We didn't really know a whole lot about some of the things going on in North Carolina, Georgia, Tennessee, and, parts of Florida, as far as like the aftermath or whatnot of that particular storm. We do know now that it was catastrophic. One for the record books, definitely. It's kind of funny now. A bunch of that's kind of waned as far as like interest in it, as far as the news cycle goes. Well, we're like 2 weeks from the election, so obviously the news cycle is going to be really heavy on the election. But as far as these hurricanes go, Hurricane Helene, we'll start with that one and kind of finish up where we left off in the last episode. It just totally, yes, there was devastation in Florida. And if you're in Florida and you're listening to this, I know you guys got pounded pretty hard by both hurricanes, more so from the second one. But, Helene kind of tore you up pretty bad in that particular area of Florida where it hit. However, what was the really, really big, damaging, catastrophic, horrible, I don't know what other words you want to use to describe what happened in North Carolina, Tennessee, and parts of Georgia, up in the kind of like the Blue Ridge Mountains, up in Appalachia, pretty much. There were some places that got over 34, 35 inches of rain from that storm. And being that everybody up there lives in a valley or on the side of a mountain, everything's channeled down into the valleys and down into those creeks, and those creeks turn into rivers, and those rivers turn into torrents, and washed whole places away, houses, vehicles, building. The whole 9 yards. It was terrible. Still is terrible. It's going to be a long road to recovery for these people in that area. We do know, I believe the last death toll that I saw was pretty close to 300, but it varies so much from whatever news source you get it from. Nobody really knows yet. There's still quite a few people missing in North Carolina and Tennessee from, the last couple of reports that I read in the last probably 24 hours. There's still quite a number of people missing. So we don't know if those are people that are, back in some of the areas that lost all power, communications or whatnot, that are still having a hard time communicating with the outside world. We could talk about this storm for hours. We're not going to this particular episode. We might do a video, and there's a lot of videos around there already floating around from people that are actually, going there to do, to help, and talk about, the things that happened. But some of the things I'm going to talk about are some of the things that aren't necessarily being reported on, and when they are, they're kind of getting, I wouldn't say a bad name, but kind of like a bad rap. So right off the rip, right after this thing happened, FEMA, if you're listening, you're trash. I can just say that. The proof is on the ground. You might be there now. And I think FEMA, the actual presence of FEMA, like more than just a couple of people landing in a private business jet to come do a site survey, they weren't really there for like the first week or so. Maybe it's just me, but the last time I checked, you're the Federal Emergency Management Agency, supposed to be able to respond to emergency situations across the United States with a quickness. All the tax money you get, whether you got any left or not, because you've, I don't know, that's a whole nother ball of wax that we're going to probably not dive into. Like, hey, where's the money at? Because we heard stories on the news coming right from the top, right from the horse's mouth, that they didn't have enough funds for X, Y, and Z because whatever. A bunch of bureaucratic nonsense when we have people, Americans, on the ground suffering when there should be resources, or there should have been, I should say, because it's a couple of weeks after the fact now, but there should have been resources en route immediately after that to get in there and do the work. There just should have been. And for those of you out there that think that they did, you might want to do a little bit of research before you make that assumption, because you know what they say about assumptions, right? And I'm getting my facts, and I'll call them facts, from first-hand accounts of people who were on the ground, residents who lived there, who come forth, who did interviews, who, try to get somebody to listen to them right after this happened. Also coming from first responders from all over the country, not on a federal level, right, but like state and local level, sending people to go help these people out. You had people from all over the United States headed to that part of the country to try to help these people out, when the federal government should have been taking the lead on that. Like I said, that's what FEMA is supposed to do. And I'm not going to sit here and just bash on FEMA. Got it. Although they are pretty terrible, especially considering all the money that's allocated to them through taxes and whatnot, and their funding they get every fiscal year to respond to incidents like this, and then they have a dismal response. Yeah, they did show up eventually, and what they did was minuscule in comparison to what your state, your local, and by local, I mean, it's people helping people. A bunch of it wasn't any sort of, actual organization. Yeah, sure, like the Red Cross, Samaritan's Purse, and all these other, great organizations were there doing work. However, it was mainly just people helping people. I can't tell you how many accounts I've seen and videos I've watched of people just loading up stuff from all over the country, driving their own vehicles down there to take these people, the necessities, because much of these people lost absolutely everything. Everything. The only thing some of these people had were the clothes on their back when they managed to get out before it was flooded. So think about that. And, we talk about survival on this channel all the time. What would you do if you lost absolutely everything but the clothes on your back? And some people lost more than that. Some people lost their lives. Like I said, granted, we don't know what the actual human toll is yet, but it's pretty astounding. Even one life lost, no matter what part of the disaster, one life lost is one too many, I think. But with these large-scale disasters, we know there's generally going to be some casualties. It's part of it. It's what happens. But being prepared for these things, being prepared for the inevitable, like we talked about in the last episode, if you live on the coast, you should probably be prepared for hurricanes. It's a way of life, right? Now, granted, most of the damage and destruction that's been talked about isn't even about Florida. It's not. They got tore up. Don't get me wrong. They're in a world of hurt down there too, but the majority of the overall just obliteration of things happened in the mountains of North Carolina and Tennessee and northern Georgia. When you get 3 foot of rain that quickly and it has nowhere to go, well, everybody lives in certain areas. We've already kind of talked about that. That's where the water's going to go. A bunch of these people didn't have proper warning for these flash floods. I've seen a couple of videos that have been published, obviously since then, and since our last episode, where people had, you thought it was a time lapse, but it was, the water come up so quick, it was a matter of minutes that these waters were rising 5, 10, 15, 20 feet in some places. Some places took a little longer to rise, but still, some of these people were trapped. Some of these places, like Chimney Rock, Black Mountain, and a couple of others like that, there's only really one road in or out. Once that road's gone, how are you going to get out? What's your egress? How are you going to get out? Better yet, how are rescue crews going to get in? You can't get everything by helicopter. And if the helicopters can't land because there's nowhere big enough for them to put down, Then you have to think about, you know, the kind of supplies that they can deliver without landing. It kind of limits them. You can only push so many supplies outside of a helicopter, or the back of a helicopter, unless, you know, obviously the military steps in, which they eventually did. The 82nd and the 101st showed up. I think it was a little over a week after it happened. They finally, I've seen videos of them rolling in, you know, helping out, doing their thing. They're doing great things. All the National Guard, I think there's National Guard from, I want to say like 20 something states that showed up in that area to help. They're doing phenomenal work. And they continue to do phenomenal work. I see, like I said, I see videos posted every day about this. But some of the things we have to, some more of the things I should say we need to look at are what's some of the prevention. Well, I say prevention. Let's go back, kind of like some lessons learned from this. And it's still an ongoing thing. It's not over. I mean, obviously the weather's done. That part of it's over. But the cleanup and then, like I said, everything's just obliterated in most places up there. It's going to take years. Some people aren't going to have power for probably a month or two. Well, it's already been almost a month now. Some people aren't going to have power for a couple of months in some of those really hard to get to areas. The infrastructure is getting repaired pretty quick. I mean, because you got so many people up there, you know, putting back up power poles, running electrical cables, you know, all the whole infrastructure thing, it's being taken care of. And it's getting done at an astonishing rate. However, it's still going to take a long time for these people to get back on their feet. And a bunch of those people, like I said before, lost absolutely everything. Flood insurance for most of them was non-existent. Most of them couldn't afford flood insurance even if they wanted it. So if your house is destroyed by a flood, you got no flood insurance and you lose everything, you know, what are you going to do? And most of those areas up there, we're not talking about filthy rich people anyway. Middle class people, maybe some of the lower middle class people, a bunch of working class people that they might struggle from paycheck to paycheck, who knows? But now they lose everything like that. The only thing is, like I said before, escape wheel is closed on their back, and they have to start over. So as far as preparedness goes, some of the lessons learned, and like I said, I wasn't there, and this is all just watching people's accounts, watching their videos, listening to their stories, and things like that. I happen to be a long distance away. If I could, I would be there to try to assist these people any way I can. So that's kind of why I'm making this video, to kind of talk about some of the lessons learned and whatnot, and maybe it helps somebody in the future and help them out when something bad happens. So let's talk about some of the lessons learned. First, there's been, and before we kind of get into that, we'll talk about kind of like the elephant in the room, is a lot of the, and there's no other way to say it, the left-leaning media, quite a few of them, are talking about, all these stories that are coming out there about FEMA not showing up and, you know, the government not doing their job, this, that, and the other. There's all misinformation. That's the new catchphrase, misinformation. What is misinformation? Well, I can tell you, most of the videos and accounts that I've seen are first-hand accounts from people who are there, people who live there, people who actually lost everything, people who actually saw the floods, people that saw their family members washed down the river. How's that misinformation? How is it? It's not. Now, yeah, there are people who like to sensationalize things sometimes, and it gets out of hand. There are always those, and I got that. But from almost everything I've seen, I've watched a lot of media coming out of here in the last month. They've been pretty spot on with that. So, misinformation? Maybe take it with a grain of salt, do a little bit of research, and actually watch those, listen to those first-hand accounts of the people who are on the ground and the people who lived through it. If you think that's misinformation, maybe you need to get your head examined, because I'll give you a little bit of knowledge, right? That knowledge being that just because you don't like something doesn't mean it's wrong. I.e., if somebody says that let's say you work for FEMA, All right, we'll just use that example because everybody knows who they are. If you work for FEMA and your job was to be there and you weren't, and I call you out on it, that's not misinformation. That's you didn't do your job and you got your feelings hurt. So stop wearing your feelings on your sleeve when it comes to things like that. If it applies to you, fine. Do your job. All right? And I will say that most of everything, that the people that are actually on the ground, even in FEMA and these organizations, are doing great things. Right? Most of this stems from the people who put things in motion to get those people and resources in the right places after these things happen. It's not the people on the ground for the most part. They're doing phenomenal jobs. I mean, you hear the stories all the time, right? I've heard so many of them. It's ridiculous. They're doing great things. So now that we kind of got that out of the way about the whole misinformation thing, it's not misinformation if I can watch it happen. Keep that in mind. Just because you don't like it don't mean it's misinformation. All right. So with that being said, some of the big takeaways that I noticed, right, from this pretty much life-changing event for a whole lot of people, and that is communication, comms, right? Cell phones went down almost immediately. Why? Because, well, for one, a bunch of those places had spotty reception before it started, right? And up in that part of the country and other parts of the country that are very mountainous and things like that, all your cell phone antennas are normally on the top of mountains. Why? Because the line of sight communications, RF signals, a whole bunch of stuff like that, they had to be up at high elevations. A bunch of those towers got knocked off right off the bat. Second, the towers that weren't knocked down, the power was out to those towers to run. And a bunch of them do have generators. I know the ones around here, a bunch of your communications towers, cell phone towers, do have backup generators, but it only has so much fuel. Once that fuel is exhausted, the power goes out and it's down. So now you just took another, piece out of the puzzle. So cell phones were, might as well just go ahead and say cell phones were not going to be a real good communication device and something that widespread and damaging. So we talked about it in one of the other videos, having a PACE plan, a primary, alternate, a contingency, and an emergency way to communicate. You can also use PACE for other things when it comes to survival related or even other tasks, but we're talking about comms. So we noticed that the phones went out immediately, pretty much. So how are these people going to communicate? Right? This led to the dilemma of so many missing people because they have no way to communicate. And there's tons and tons and tons and tons of ways, from GMRS radios, right, which some of your like your standards, Motorola's, all the way up into things like this right here, like a Baofeng ham radio, right? Yeah, it's cheap. I got it. It's small, but there are ways to make them work better. Bigger antennas. I got a bunch of different radios. And there was a bunch of people that I noticed after this that went up there and set up communications hubs using ham radios, amateur radios, GMRS radios to try to push out signals and try to get information back from these areas. Because those particular radios, most radios, like all radios, work off line of sight. So if all the repeaters were down, the repeaters are what lets one radio expand its range. For you people out there that might not know what a repeater is when we're talking about radios, right? So let's say that one of these radios, let's say it had a range of a mile. It's just for instance, it's not the actual range of it, right? It can only talk a mile, line of sight. So clear from one radio to another. Well, if I put a repeater in between there, I send that signal out, the repeater catches it and sends it back out and pushes that signal out further. It's basically how it works, right? So repeaters are generally put on top of water towers, some cell phone towers do have them on there too, for emergency communication. All your police, your fire, your EMS, and all those things use repeaters. That's how a cop is able to use a radio way out in the sticks somewhere and still be able to talk to dispatch. In most places, right? They use repeaters. Amateur radio is the same thing. So during this event, there were a lot of people in that area that stepped up and set up networks to help the EMS, the fire, and all those people communicate, because all their stuff got wiped out, right? So to help them communicate and orchestrate rescues search and rescue, up in the mountains, delivering supplies, getting messages to and from some people up in some areas that also did have some radios. There were some people up there that did have them, and that was their only way to communicate, right, to try to get help. So communications was a huge thing, is a huge thing. It always is. But this right here kind of hit the nail on the head when it's like, hey, what happens when cell phones go down? Everybody in the survival community always wants to talk about, oh no, EMPs, cell phones go down, what are we going to do? There's an example. Do a little bit of research, dig into what happened, read some of the accounts, listen, watch some of the videos. There's a bunch of great videos on YouTube that discuss what happened during this and how communications were a primary thing. Because without comms, I can't get your rescue people out to you. I can't find you. Can't get you supplies. I can't get you to a hospital if you need medical attention. Heck, comms is at the top of the list, right? And the cell phone systems failed. I mean, there's no other way around it. I mean, this natural disaster crushed them. So, that being said, comms, right? Huge takeaway from this. Check out your comms plan. And you can use anything from, and like I said, the PACE plan, normally 4 different ways. But, cell phone's always going to be number one. And in some instances, you might have a natural disaster like this where your cell phone still works. Don't take that for granted. Always have your backups, right? Have a backup to the backup. The whole 3 is 2, 2 is 1, 1 is none. So, I mean, come on. For the most people that are going to be watching this video, you understand what I'm talking about. Okay? And then, let's say you got radios, so maybe you got an amateur radio or GMRS. Those both require licenses. However, in emergency situations, you can, and I've seen this one, some people up there kind of getting a little agitated with some of the people on certain frequencies, because on amateur radio, you're required to have a license for certain, for amateur radio period, but certain bands require a different class of license. There's 3 different classes. We're not going to dive into that right now because we're not really talking about ham radios. But with that being said, to transmit, you had to have a license, unless it's an absolute emergency for life, limb, or eyesight, right? And then you can, if you know how, use one of those radios to call for help. Here's the kicker. Another account, some guys that were up there, they had set up a station or whatever, and you had some people that were ham operators that are really good at what they do, that were being like net control stations, like for a whole area, kind of like a hub or whatnot. Getting mad that people were transmitting on there because they didn't have a call sign. All they wanted to know was their call sign so they could verify that they had a license. If you're out there listening and you're one of those people that did that, you need to go back and read that book again that tells you what the rules are from the FCC. All right? It's part of basic amateur radio 101. Life, limb, or eyesight, I can use that radio to call for help. I don't need a daggone call sign. So there's that. I digress from that because that one kind of gets me worked up a little bit, that people are more worried about a call sign than people's life. So with that being said, ham radios, GMRS. GMRS also requires a license, but that's more of like your 2-way radios that have a little bit longer distance than a walkie-talkie. Walkie-talkies don't travel too far, especially in wooded areas. What's left of them up there, they don't travel too far. So after radios, something else that you might want to do, and this is something I recently got into, it's a communications platform called Meshtastic. They use these little things right here. They're called nodes, right? There's a little simple one, all right? And basically the way it works is using a cell phone, put that down over there, using a cell phone, there's a cell phone app for Meshtastic, right? You get the device. It's basically a very low voltage, long range radio, RF signals, right? But it doesn't require a license. It only sends text messages. There's no voice. You can't talk on it or anything like that. You use the app. The app connects to the node, whatever type. There's lots of different types. And then from this, that node talks to somebody else that has a node. That node transfers that message to their phone, which they can read. As long as they have a node, both people have to have a node for it to work. So there is that. So it's a network. But with that being said, both people have to have a node. Both people have to have the app on their phone. It does not require a cellular network, and it does not require the internet. So cell phones go down, the internet goes down. As long as your phone works, you have power for your phone, a way to charge your phone, and a way to charge this, and it's within range, you can communicate with one another and you can send messages, right? They're encrypted messages. Okay, there's lots of different types. I'm not an expert on Meshtastic by a long shot. I just started with it, right? But I do know the basics, the premise of it, right? So that's how it works. And there's lots of different types of nodes out there. Some of them are solar powered. Some of them like this are rechargeable. Like use a cell phone charger, right? You can mount them anywhere. And there's lots of different types. That's another way to communicate should networks go down. Something to think. And they do have a decent range, depending on the elevation of the node. I routinely, with this little node right here, transmit up to about 5 miles now. And I can hit other nodes a little further out. And the thing, it does repeat. They will hop from node to node up to like 3 times. And anybody out there listening, if you're a Meshtastic Suave, please correct me in the comments or send me a message or whatever. I know I'm just throwing out the basics here for people to kind of get a little grasp on it, maybe go do some research on it, right? Get them started in it. So, like I said, I'm not an expert in it, but I know how it works. And mine worked great. I've had it about a month now, and I even had an aircraft a while back. Somebody had one on an aircraft like 700 miles away, and it picked it up on here. Didn't get a message from them, but it still was able to find it on a map, which is another thing. It has mapping software on it too. So if you're sending a message from one node to another one, I can also find you on a map. And that might be valuable if maybe you're out lost somewhere. I need to know exactly where you are. Some of them have GPS on them. So it's just another communications platform, right? Meshtastic, check it out. So we talked about cell phones. We talked about, different types of amateur radio, GMRS, and we talked about this new thing called Meshtastic, right? These nodes. Now that we kind of talked about, and there's lots of other communications things. Those are just some of the bigger ones that are kind of easy to use, don't cost a whole lot, things cheap. But some of the other takeaways that I noticed were the amount and type of supplies that people had stockpiled. Now I'm not talking about the people who lost completely everything, because it don't matter. You could have had $1 million worth of supplies. If it got washed away, you have nothing, and you have to start over. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the people that were in the area this house maybe just lost power, and they're still without power. They're not going to have power for a month, right? 2 months, 3 months, whatever the case may be. I've seen a whole bunch of accounts of some of those people. They published, a bunch of them have published a whole bunch of videos. Most of them are homesteaders, farmsteaders, and things like that up in the area. And some of the things that I noticed that were really helping them out were things, obviously, you need your necessities, right? Food, water, shelter. Was there, as far as water goes, was things like Berkey filters, right? Or some kind of water filtration system in the house. So, like I said, don't have power, but they still have water. Now, a bunch of people up there did have to, even on well water, they said, hey, boil your water. It's contaminated, this, that, and the other. I'm not sure how some of that works for some of the people that live further up the mountain where their spring is near the top of the mountain that has no way to be contaminated. I'm not an expert in that. So if the experts that were there said boil your water. It's pretty simple, right? But I noticed a bunch of these people had systems like your Berkey filters or whatnot, something so they could filter a whole bunch of water at their house, and they were good. There's a plethora of water up there, so there's that. Another thing is I noticed that a bunch of people that live up there, well, they already live in a wooded area anyway. Most people up there had some sort of chainsaw or something to cut wood. A bunch of people up there have fireplaces and have to cut trees anyway, so it kind of worked out for them, already having some of those things. Watched a couple of videos of people with small tractors. They have been doing great things with those, because some of the places up there where some of the roads have partially washed away and you can't necessarily get a big tractor or, like a bulldozer or something in there quite yet. Some of the small tractors are actually able to get in there and do some of the work to try to get the infrastructure to a certain place where you can get your bigger equipment in. And you got to think, just because we had this huge disaster, right, in that area, not all of your first responders are focused on that particular thing. You still have 911 calls if 911 system works in that area, or what, you know what I mean? So people are still gonna, hey, I got chest pains. I got to send an ambulance out to go take that person to the hospital when they can find one. All that stuff didn't stop. All this stuff got added on to the top of it, with the disaster and whatnot. So you got to think about those things too. I know there's a bunch of places that have been set up in certain areas up there, like makeshift camps and whatnot. I'm seeing a bunch of great things about that. You have a bunch of local farmers and people who have a lot of like produce, food and stuff like that, well, they're not going to be able to sell anyway because the whole place is kind of, messed up and or whatnot. And they're taking all this stuff there and making sure that people have food, right? They're giving this stuff away, making sure, for one, these people get fed. Two, the food doesn't get wasted. Wasting food's bad anyway, but in a situation like that, man, you got to make sure these people are fed, because the people that are still there, that are up there, these guys are up there working, like 18-hour days or whatnot, trying to clear debris. I mean, they're going to be clearing debris for a long time. And then you got all the other people that have come in from all over the country to help out. And there's also logistics and support that goes into that. So, clearing tools, I've noticed that's a real big takeaway from that. When we're doing our preparedness and whatnot, having the right tools, right, to chainsaws, extra blades, all the accessories that go with operating a chainsaw. Unless you live in a place that's completely void of trees, and you do have trees on your property, or the way to your property or out of your property or somewhere close requires you to drive down a road that has trees that could come down and block your way in or out. You need to know how to operate a chainsaw if you never have. Doesn't mean you necessarily have to buy one, but you need to know how to operate one. So power tools, right? Great things to have. Also some hand tools, hand saws, things to clear stuff out the way, shovels. I saw a big thing up there where they were needing a whole lot of flat tip shovels, and they're using that to dig all the mud out of a bunch of businesses and houses that were still left. And I think it was Chimney Rock. You had soldiers there from, I believe it was the 82nd that were there. And they were really needing wheelbarrows and a bunch of flat shovels, or square shovels, I should say, because they were helping these guys clean out their businesses or whatnot, because the mud in it was like 2 or 3 foot deep. So a whole bunch of things like that, wheelbarrow, shovels, stuff a bunch of people take for granted all the time, So yeah, another thing I was noticing as far as a takeaway from supplies and resources or whatnot are things like, which I was about to do a video on this anyway, about headlamps, right? Headlamps, flashlights, they were needing a whole bunch of those, right? Just having little things like that. Headlamps are amazing. That's a whole nother thing. Probably doing a whole video on just headlamps, different types. But headlamps are amazing. And when you're working long hours and things like that, and you're doing stuff where you need your hands free, can't go wrong with a headlamp. Quality headlamps, and ways to keep them running, like extra batteries or rechargeable one if you have one, right? So that's another thing that I saw that they were really needing, and the ones they had, they were going fast. So I want to say about 2 weeks after, that event, right? We had the hurricane go through Florida, the second hurricane go through Florida. Now, granted, it cut right across the peninsula. It made landfall, I want to say, as a Cat 3 when it made landfall, I believe. And it got up to a Cat 5 before it made landfall, when it was still out in the Gulf of Mexico. They had wind gusts up to 225 miles an hour at one point. That is just ridiculous. Thankfully, it did weaken tremendously before it made landfall, which is good for all the people in Florida. I know they still had, ton of damage, and they're still dealing with all that, the storm surge and whatnot. And there are a couple of real bad tornadoes that spawned off of that also. However, thankfully it weakened tremendously before it made landfall. Because if it would have made landfall as that, Cat 5 with 185-mile-an-hour winds and the gust over 200, it would have been on a whole nother level of catastrophic that we haven't seen in quite a long time. I think casualties could have possibly topped something like the Galveston hurricane in 1900, which, for those of you out there who don't know, is the most, as far as term of loss of life, the most deadly natural disaster in recorded American history. All right, I'm sure there's been other natural disasters in other places, hurricane, typhoon related. All right, you can just go look them up. That were way more devastating in loss of life, but as far as America goes, that's ours, right? So thankfully, it calmed down a little bit before it made landfall as a Cat 3. But up in Appalachia, so you went from 80-degree days, 85-degree days, all this cleaned up, and then they had a cold snap and it dropped off to like 40 degrees up in the mountains. And there were some places up there last week that were predicted to get snow. I didn't look back to see how much they got or whatever. It's up there higher, over 4,000 foot in elevation, so kind of higher up, but not most of your places. But still, it was stupid cold up there, and without electricity for heat, they were having a big run on Mr. Buddy heaters. I have a Mr. Buddy heater. They're amazing. But I know there were a bunch of people that were buying up whole truckloads of Mr. Buddy heaters and taking them over there to that area and giving them out to these people. Unfortunately, they had to they run off propane, so they're having a run on propane also. Heaters. We talked about comms, right? We talked about these power tools. We talked about your basics, your food, your water. We kind of really hit on food, but water. Like I said, well, we kind of did, because some of those farms, the farmsteaders, depending on which one you want to call them, were kind of helping the community with a bunch of stuff they already had stored up. So that was good. And the thing about most of the farmers and stuff up there is that a bunch of them have all the equipment anyway. They have tractors, they have backhoes, some of them have bulldozers, they have lots of earth moving equipment to help facilitate some of this cleaning up for the areas they could get into. So, and this episode was focused pretty much on that. All right, we could talk for hours about all the things that happened there, ways that things that happened, things it could have went better, things that did go well. So I'm going to leave it on a couple of things that went well, a couple of real good improvements that I think should happen, right? And maybe a way forward. So first thing, the things that I saw that went really, really well, right, was the way the community came together. I say the community, the whole region of that area, right, came together. And most of the country had some part in that. Even if they sent their National Guard, they still came together to help those people out. And when I say country, I'm not talking about the government. I'm talking about the people, right? We the people, right? Not we the government. All right. The people were doing this. At one point there were like 70 or 80 privately owned helicopters and another 25 or 35 privately owned aircraft ferrying supplies in and out of those places because the National Guard hadn't shown up yet. And some of those places the National Guard couldn't get into because, let's face it, a UH-60 doesn't, or a Chinook, don't fit in small areas. So they were using privately owned helicopters that are kind of smaller. They can get in tighter areas to help these people out. And they were just running laps on their own dime, burning their own fuel, their own maintenance costs. They didn't care. They were doing that to help people out. So that went great. There's tons of donations still coming in, and they still will be, right? So that's a great thing. And as far as a little bit of negative, I kind of already talked about, and I'm not going to dive too far into that one. All right, but the lack of response, the lack of resources, and the amount of time it took for the federal government to respond. Without diving down a rabbit hole, we can send billions of dollars overseas to help other countries out. But when our own countrymen are suffering, and I mean suffering, it takes you a week to respond, 2 weeks to respond, 3 weeks to respond. You had 2 very large military units within a couple hundred miles on either side of this event. And it took you a week or so to get them there. Now, I've heard stories, and I don't know how true they are, that some of those commanders were, hey, let's go, let's get it done. And they were held back. I don't know how true that is. That's just what I heard. So you can take that with a grain of salt. It might be true, it might not be true. Right? Because a bunch of that was their own family members, people they know, their communities, right? Their state. So I think the federal response could have been much more expedient and thorough when it came to taking care of these people. I really do. I think that's about the only real negative thing that I've heard about or conclusion I've come to about that. I mean, other than a few looters here and there, but they kind of dealt with that up there. They dealt with it themselves. They policed that up, and from all accounts that I've heard, you loot up there, they take care of business. So, and rightfully so. So yeah. So take away from this whole episode, right? And it's kind of running long. Is be prepared. Right? Take care of your family. Look out for your neighbor. And generally, just be a good person. That's all you got to do. Right? That's all you got to do. Stay prepared. Take care of your family. Take care of your neighbors. Look after your neighbors. Build a community together. A strong community. Because as much as I hate it when I hear people say, I'm going to go out in the woods and I'm going to survive by myself with this 100-pound bug out bag or whatever go out in the woods and live forever, when SHTF or whatever, you're not. There's probably one in, I don't know what the numbers would probably be, but it's very, very, very slim that you're going to be able to pull that off by yourself. It's just not. Statistically speaking, ain't going to happen. All right. There's always that one or two out there that can do it, but if you ain't in the right area, like, I don't know, Alaska, Montana, one of those, better states for living off the grid and out in the middle of nowhere, it's not going to cut it, because guess what? Everybody else thinks you're going to do the same thing. There's only so many natural resources you're going to have. So keep that in mind. Keep that in mind. So if you like this, make sure you like and subscribe. Check out some of the other videos. The bug out bag videos, or get home bag video, I should say, is doing pretty good. We're up over, I think, right at 6,000 views now. So, I mean, it's doing good. Thanks for all the comments out there. Thanks for all the questions that I had. And thanks for, tuning into the channel. So, with that, just remember that speed is fast, but accuracy is final. It really is. Stay safe, and remember, you are the last line of defense.